I'm really, really excited to be in conversation with you for multiple reasons. But my name is Ntiri Broxton, and I am the Senior Director of Education at MOAD. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. So MOAD's physical building may be closed due to the mandatory shelter in place, but you can still get your fill of art and artists of the African diaspora. So every single Wednesday at 1:00 p.m., join MOAD staff members. It's usually myself and Elena Gross as we visit some of our favorite artists in their studios to see what they're currently working on and how their work has changed as a result of the quarantine. It's a very rare opportunity to hear directly from artists from their studios, and we always follow every conversation with a Q&A from the audience. So if you are joining us on Zoom, please look at the Q&A tab and enter your questions as they come up into that, and we'll get to them in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the conversation. If you're joining us on Facebook, also enter your questions within that chat, and we will get to those as well. Please visit our website so that you can see which artists we have coming up. We're totally programmed through December. You can also go back and watch all of our past talks on MOAD's YouTube channel, as well as on Facebook. This series was made possible by generous donations by the Westridge Foundation, Arts Bridges Foundation, MOAD members, and viewers like you. Thank you so much for your support. I'm gonna start off with some housekeeping, which involves some statements. So MOAD stands in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. We honor and mourn the senseless murders of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, and Breonna Taylor, whose death sits especially heavy on our hearts following the recent verdict. We also mourn so many others who have lost their lives at the hands of police brutality and racial injustice, including those whose names we do not know. Now we're joining you in the virtual space, but we still want to acknowledge the land that we are on. So as many of us are settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcefully brought to this continent, our institutions were founded upon exclusions and erasures of the indigenous peoples whose lands we are located. It's with deep respect that MOAD acknowledges that even within the virtual space, our people, our work, and our network servers are on native lands, and we thank the indigenous peoples of the Bay Area who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. I am joined today by the amazing Oakland-based artist, Ntiri, who is a writer, photographer specializing in portraiture and filmmaker who has been based in the Bay Area since 2007. Born in New York to Ghanaian parents, Ntiri considers the ritual of making 35mm black and white images as a ceremony of light, chance, and memory, in which focus is less important than feeling. His work has been featured in Vice, WaxPoetics, the Oakland Museum, the Berkeley Art Museum, and he is a contributing artist in Artists Imagine Freedom, Artworks for Freedom, a benefit auction for critical resistance, which ends today. In 2017, Ntiri wrote and directed his first short film, Snow Mountain, which won Audience Choice Awards at the SF Urban and Liberated Lens Film Festivals. His first feature, A Lo-Fi Blues, was awarded an SFFILM Rainin Grant for screenwriting in 2019, and he is currently completing an SFFILM FilmHouse Residency in 2020. Ed, thank you so much for joining me today.
What's up, Ntiri? Nice to be here.
How's everything going?
You know, I'm chilling. You know, I'm good.
Awesome. And where are you right now? And you know, how's everything going?
So I'm actually on the other coast. I'm in Brooklyn right now. Just home visiting family and visiting some friends, some artist friends, kind of a self-imposed retreat. So I'm in upstate. Well, I was in upstate New York all week. I just got to Brooklyn, just enjoying autumn. Yeah.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Nice. I love it. You know what? We've been in shelter in place for a while, 8 months now, I believe, in the Bay Area, and we don't know when that's going to end. You know, what impact has not only this quarantine and the pandemic brought on by COVID-19, but also the pandemic of race within America and this new focus. So, you know, I would even say a year ago, Black Lives Matter was really this underground movement. And now, you know, we're seeing that, you know, the media is talking about it. People who did not give much value to it, before 8 months ago, before George Floyd, hit the media. And now it's even on an international scale. How has all of this impacted the work that you make as an artist?
Wow, so the short answer is that it hasn't, because we've been doing the work. The scope of the work, the focus of the work, honestly hasn't changed. It's really everyone else's response to the work and interest in it and seeing the relevancy of it. That has changed significantly. So the amount of people that are hitting you up or paying attention or realizing that there's a need for image makers that view the world through a particular lens and highlight a particular experience, that has changed quite a bit. But in terms of my practice,
you haven't seen any.
And
I love it.
A year from now, I'll still be Black, right? I mean, I'm still gonna be here.
That's true. And your work has always been interested in identity and in Blackness. Can you tell us about this and how you got started?
Yeah, I don't even know how to answer that question.
I mean, yeah, I know it's a large question, but I guess when did you first discover that you were an artist and this was a path for you? And when you started your art practice, did it investigate Blackness in a direct fashion, or is that a later development that came along?
I think that's a later development for sure. I think I've always, I think like most artists, you always view the world through the lens of an artist. So pretty early on. Like as a kid, I did graffiti. Was making beats and producing music. And when I first got a camera, I started taking a lot of pictures and was really interested in it, but didn't really work with that much intention. And then much later, as you come to terms with, identity and work through your identity issues that you have growing up in this country. And for full context, like, I'm from Ghana, was born in the Bronx, moved when I was 10 from like Parkchester, South Bronx to Long Island. So all Black neighborhood to all white neighborhood. That's my high school.
Wow.
Then you go to college and all this stuff. So in terms of identity and how other people identify me versus how I'm seen at home with my parents who are not American, all of that eventually informs the way that you make images. And I think that to answer your question, there was a certain point, probably about 8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, that I started to realize that I was very interested in like the African diaspora, like all over, especially in Central and South America, and how that relates to Ghana and how that relates to the States. That's just like an interest. It's an interesting tribe of people, and I think my work, if anything, if there's one umbrella over all of it, I think that would be it. Okay.
Nice. And how old were you when you picked up your first 35 millimeter camera?
I was probably in my late 20s.
Okay.
Late 20s. So it's pretty relatively recent. It's not like I've been shooting film forever or anything. That's definitely when I started shooting seriously. Like shooting on film was just much different than digital cameras, where it's just like you can just mess around. It was like it became a thing,
And why 35 millimeter? Why film camera, which is so, why shoot with film, when it's relatively expensive, compared to digital. There's also the lag factor of when you're shooting, you don't know until you develop the film if what you got was correct. And why an interest in kind of going back in time through the technology?
I mean, to be honest, it's the answer is so simple. It's just curiosity. Like I love old film cameras and the way that they're built. So I used to go to flea markets a lot, and when I was like looking for records and things like that, I'd find cameras and I was drawn to them. So at first, the first film cameras I got, they didn't really work. They were just like pieces, And then I opened one up, started messing with it. I was like, what would happen if I put film in here? I put film in it, and it was just so fun to go through that process. And then once you start to get into it, it forces you to slow down. You just sort of, when you know how the machinery works, you can use the machinery in a certain way, and you just have a connection to it. that I never felt with other mediums. So yeah, it's pretty much, I just fell in love with the process of finding cameras, fixing them up, shooting film, developing film, then printing film. Like the entire
Mhm.
process is just an endless, uh, I don't know, endless. Every stage of the process has its own process. So that's what's kind of fun about it.
Sure, sure. Now, for a photographer, it involves creating your work. Not only involves the camera, but the dark room, the paper, to print and to also to process your film. Do you do all that at your home studio, or where does that primarily happen for you?
Yeah, for the most part, I do it at home, because it's actually not that hard. You can get the chemicals pretty easily, and you can develop at home. You could print at home, um, process at home. I mean, you can do everything at home. I mean, there is one
Hmm.
place in Berkeley called Looking Glass Photo that I love going to them to process or use their dark room because you want a little bit more space.
Hmm.
But besides that, just DIY, man.
I love it. I love it. I also understand from doing a little research about you. You also, um, I mean, you talked about growing up in New York, but you're a hip hop kid, and a hip hop fan, and not just hip hop, not necessarily what's so in vogue right now, but you're into lo-fi, old school hip hop. Is
Mhm.
what I understand.
Yeah.
Um,
It's 80s babies, man. We're just, there's a generation of people that were raised by hip hop music.
mhm.
And I almost think every generation is raised by some cultural force. But I just happened to be born in New York at the height. At least I was coming into my own at the height of this movement that would become this global phenomena, and it's informed every aspect of my life and practice. I mean, the reason I even got into writing is because I was into certain MCs. It's just all, it's an ethos. It's a way of looking at the world, and very DIY. And it's yeah. I mean, you understand, man. You've been there.
Definitely, I definitely understand that completely, and I love your connection with, just going back to analog. I'm gonna think of Erica Badu lines of being, an analog girl in a digital world,
Yeah.
of using the camera, that technology, which involves, like, you have to have skill. I think so many people, right now we have digital photography at our fingertips if you own a cell phone. So more people have a camera probably now than have ever had one. And with selfie culture, there isn't an emphasis on getting the moment correct, right? Because you can take 2,000 photographs and pick the right one. But when you're shooting with film, you have a limited number of frames on that film, and you've got to get it right. And so, what is it about that for you that drew you to that process? And then as we get also into your work, people can see that, and hopefully appreciate the mastery of what you do as an artist.
Well, so when you said that Erica Badu line, the analog drum in the world, like there's a lot of parallels with music as well. Because in the music production world, right, it started off on analog, vinyl,
Mm-hmm.
just studios with hardware and equipment in them. Now we have digital. You can
Mm-hmm.
produce on your laptop. You can have plugins that emulate this analog equipment. You have thousands of tracks that you can just layer on your computer anywhere and make music, and most people really can't tell the difference. And I think for me
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
difference is that when you look at Al Green or like the Beatles or whoever, right, back in the day they really recorded on like 4 tracks on 2-inch tape. So it's like, you messed up, you keeping it,
Mm-hmm.
unless you want to go in and cut the tape and cut and splice it, a headache. So it's, when you're working in that way with that sort of limitation, it changes the way you work. You're so much more thoughtful about every decision. You just have more intention. It's more of a big deal. And it's the same with what you were saying, thousands and thousands of images, but most of them don't really mean anything. And
Mm.
and not that they're bad, because there's actually wonderful work out there, but it's and another thing, so Sebastian Salgado, photographer, he did a
Yes.
talk at city arts and lectures in the city in San Francisco. And he said this thing that, you know, it just shook me, because someone asked the same question you just asked. And then he said, there are more images than ever, but there are very few photographers. And I was, you know, he said that in like 2018 or something like that. It was such poise and confidence. He's like, yeah, I know there's a lot of images, very few photographers. So it's, I don't know. I hope that answers your question. I'm going to answer your question. Please answer, because that's it.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. I love that concept, and I totally agree with you, because there's an art form that I love that you're keeping alive, by going back into the analog, and I'm gonna jump into your work in just a second, so that folks who are not familiar can see what you do and what your eye is as a photographer. But you know, before we do that, I want to go back into your history. You know, you talked about family coming from Ghana, and I'm particularly excited about this because I like, as I shared with you, I lived in Kumasi for a year, and they're like, Ghanaians have a very specific culture that is infectious. Like, I don't think, you know, even as a visitor who I don't have Ghanaian ancestry that I know of. I may have some, you know, it may have been lost through the transatlantic slave trade, but there is a very particular sensibility. There's a very particular way of seeing the world that no matter what group your family comes from, I find Ghanaians have, that really no one else in the world has. What role does your family, that history, that sensibility, play into the work that you create and the stories and the narratives that you tell through the work?
Wow, that's a great question, and I'm glad to hear that you enjoyed your time in Ghana, because that's home. But yeah, I think so. My grandfather is a big influence, and he actually was a photographer in Kumasi, and the thing about him that I liked is that he didn't really take it so seriously. Like, he didn't call himself an artist. He was an artisan. It was a craft. He did his work for people. He also played guitar. I never heard him play guitar, but my mother tells me stories about how he played guitar. And it was kind of like a ritual at the end of the day. It's just like you play, and that's just how you commune. And it's, you know, it's art just for, it's like the role of art as a, you know, method of communication and curiosity, and just sort of like eating or breathing, like anything. It's not this separate thing. And I think I got that from, I don't know, I think that's in my DNA for sure, where I'm not actually into the idea of art as commerce or so tied to revenue all the time. I like the idea of art just as something you do. And in Ghana, that's why you might experience it there. You go there, and art is everywhere. Art is in the way people dress, the way people walk, the way people do their hair, the way they cook. It's just like everyone is an artist, I think. And it's not something you even talk about. It's just part of life, right? So that's I'd say how it's influenced me today growing up in the States, for sure.
I love that. And it's so true. Art is everywhere. It's on the trotros, it's on the taxis, it's on the buildings, it's just in everything. And I think even the way people talk, and the way that they move their bodies, and, you know, lots of things that have definitely translated into the Americas, through the transatlantic slave trade and through the diaspora. I want to jump into your work right now.
Yeah, do your thing, yeah.
Yes. Let's see, we don't have any video that we have to worry about. So yes, here we go. And I hope, is this showing up as a full screen for you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I see.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. And so yeah, this very first image that you sent me, this is part of a series. And I seriously thought that this was I thought that this was taken in Ghana. It looks like Cape Coast or you know, someplace like that. Can you tell us about this image?
Sure. This is a fisherman in Haiti, in a small island called Tortuga, which is north of Port-au-Paix. So it's a very rural island. It's mostly fishermen and farmers. And I went on a trip there 2 years ago with a friend of mine, Sarah, amazing person. And we were really there to help a friend's nonprofit. They have a nonprofit where they basically have a school and they feed the kids in the neighborhood and they teach kids how to farm. So went there to document for a friend who's from Oakland, right? And as I met people there, like this is interesting. I didn't go there intending to photograph. You know, I definitely didn't intend to take this picture. It's just while I was there, I just met these people that looked exactly like me. I mean, granted, they're speaking, you know, Creole, but I speak a little French. I was able to kind of communicate, but it's very similar in many ways to Tree. You know, they have their own intonation in the language, and clearly in the DNA we're the same people. And so I ended up photographing a lot, and I was only there for maybe 6 or 7 days, and I just created an entire series of work, all from this one island. So this is one of the images there. And again, this is a funny one too, because I only took one photo. I took 2 photos of him. You know, I just approached him, spoke for a couple minutes, asked if I could take a photo, and you know, look at his. There's like a regalness, a stoicism. There's just sort of a presence, and we barely know each other. Granted, we know each other in perhaps a much deeper way, but in terms of just what happened and where this image comes from, it's just 2 people on an island, you know, taking a photo. I don't know. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And can you talk about, like, are you formal? You talked about picking up photography in your 20s. Were you formally trained? Because I see so many elements of composition and, you know, the way that you're guiding our eye within this image, the way that you've composed it. So, you know, is this your own personal composition that you've discovered through just working with the camera, or, you know, where does your eye come from? I guess.
No clue. I definitely have never taken a class. I took one digital photography class years ago as like an elective kind of thing, but no, I'm not trained as a photographer. It's really again the cameras, the connection to the cameras themselves. Like I have my camera here. It's just like I like it, you know. I just like it, like the way it works. I like simple cameras, and then it's really about what you see through the viewfinder. And I think every photographer knows that, where it's like you look through the viewfinder and you just listen to your eye, and your eye will tell you how to compose. There's just an order to things. So that's where that comes from.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to talk about, you know, the composition. I love how he is the center, and I love how he is staring back at us. But the way that you've composed that, you know, the boat, and given it so much of the foreground, how it leads us to the one and the ocean, you know, and then we've got this other boat that then brings us back to him again. It's just, it's masterful. I've studied a little bit of photography, and, you know, as someone who I am not trained, this is the type of moment I'm always trying to catch, and, you know, not quite hitting it. So, you know, I think there is a certain talent that you as a photographer has. It's innate, and I definitely don't want to take that for granted.
Like, I'm certain if you were where I was at that time, you would have taken the same exact image.
Probably not. I would have done a rookie mistake and put him in the middle or something, you know. It's such a much more powerful image, the way that you've composed it, and even the way that you've printed it. It gives me a sense of another time, another place.
Thank you.
And this beautiful image right here, again, just I think the way that you choose to compose your image, and kind of just the shots that you capture are things that I wouldn't, you know, if I was sitting here with you in the same place, I wouldn't think to take this shot. I'd be scared that the sky would be too bright. I wouldn't get it right, so I wouldn't even attempt it. Is this also within Haiti?
Yeah, this is also in Haiti. This is I have like a kind of a personal connection to this image, where I'm very detached, I think, from my images. I'm like, yeah, whatever, you take photos, whatever. this one I do like. And the reason I like it is because the moment before this photograph happened, you know, it was like a special moment. And it was basically me and this guy Cap, who's in the tree, just sitting under the trees. This older, he's like the elder there, probably about 75, but he moves like he's like 40. He's like super fit and does all the farming and all the work. And we were sitting under this mango tree, you know, and, you know, whenever he wants to get a mango, he just steps up and he shakes the tree, and then the mangoes come down and you just eat them. And so this is him walking up into the tree to grab some more mangoes. And, you know, I took the photo more just because it was just really cool, just how it was such a relaxing, calm moment. You know, like we didn't go here thinking it was going to be photos. I had my camera with me. We're chilling. We're eating mangoes. We're just enjoying the weather. He's like, yeah, you want some more? Goes up, and I'm like, yeah, you got to take that photo, right?
I love that. I love that. You know, and there's just also a sense of wonder and imagination. You know, as I'm glad that you're sharing the story, but you know, I think as a viewer, you start to compose your own story about what this could be about, and you know how he's climbing this tree. So you know, so freely, he doesn't have any equipment on, and you know, there's also the sense of this being directly above you, and it's a little scary within that as well.
Mm. Yeah. I think, you know, again, that's another thing too, where I don't know if I ruin it by telling the story behind it, the actual story. Sometimes it's good to just let it be what it is, you know. But yeah.
No, I love hearing that story. Because I don't think it replaces the story that we tell ourselves, or that, you know, the imagination wants to, where it wants to take you with an image. And that's, I think that's kind of one of the magical parts about the way that you create your work, is that even though there is a story behind it, we're not wedded to only that version of the story. And I think, you know, that's a similar one with this, where we see the sun low on the water. And you've really, just the way that you've printed this, it feels vintage. And, you know, was that something that you intentionally created within the camera as you're taking the photograph, or is this something that happened in the darkroom to get this effect?
Yeah, you're definitely a photographer, I could tell. Yeah, so this is darkroom. This is actually a mistake exposure-wise. Composition-wise, this is what I saw, you know, and you see something, you instinctively have a reaction to it, you want to capture it. But obviously it was very bright at this moment, and I use a camera that doesn't have a meter, so I have to look at the light and know my aperture and my shutter speed immediately, and I'm good enough that I can guess, and here I guessed very wrong. So this negative is super blown out, way overexposed. You can barely see anything. And while I was going through these negatives, the Haiti prints, the first prints, I didn't, because, you know, it just looked like crap. And then later, I went through all the negatives that I messed up, and I was like, let me see if I can coax something out of this in the darkroom. And that's what this was. This was a very, very like long process of letting the light sit on this negative for 3 or 4 minutes sometimes at a time, until whatever information was there came out. And eventually this is what appeared. And I was like, oh wow, like there's actually something there, and you can always manipulate, you know, the material to get something. So I think it was worth keeping, because it's like a nice little moment, like all the silhouettes. So definitely darkroom work.
Nice. I mean, it gives the effect of like an old tintype, you know, and it's almost like a documentation. But again, and I'm definitely, I have a collection of tintypes. I'm deeply into them, and you know, I've learned about them from Deb Willis and her investigations of Black figures and photography over history. But you know, tintypes often didn't have Black people in them, and so you know, I kind of wonder if by creating this, even though you know, you say it wasn't totally intentional, but your desire to work through this overexposed film and to bring something out, I don't know if you had a connection to it looking like, even maybe a daguerreotype or some very ancient, 100-year-old technology in photography. Is there was there any desire for that, or is this just me trying to like stick it in an art historical context?
No. I think both are true. They're definitely okay. So technically speaking, this was a negative that didn't work, that I had to work very hard to get something out of, and because I had to work so hard to get something out of, it's a little grainier than normal images, and it definitely has the characteristics of a daguerreotype or images like that, and that in itself is interesting to me, and that definitely is something I'm not looking at it like, oh, I actually like it more because it looks like that, but it wasn't intentional the moment I took the photo, for sure. That answers your question. It's sort of,
Yeah, for sure.
it evolved.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah, it evolved into that from that moment, but it still fits into what you're saying. Like, I still think that documenting it in that way, it gives it almost more power, depending on how you look at it. So
yeah, I love it, and I love the diversity of each one of the images. You're not striving for just one particular look within your photography, and I think you're breaking the rules, but and it's successful, which can be challenged with any art medium when you start to break the rules that are laid out of what you should do. Having the perfect white and black balance. So I could see how you would think it would be a fail, but then it turned into such a success.
well, I'm glad you like it, man. Because it took a lot of work to make it happen, and it's fun to share it and see, just get people's feelings about it.
Mm-hmm.
I never learned the rules, so I don't know. I just like there's like these imaginary constraints that you put on yourself, or that you see from the outside world, and what people say is a good image or not a good image. But it's nonsense. Just
Exactly. And I think there's something freeing to your work, that you are not constrained by rules that someone else imposed. And then I want to jump to something that I think in very many ways does follow the rules. This almost has like that Gordon Parks feel of the lighting, but clearly not of that era. It's we can see the cell phone at the center of the photograph, which obviously lets us know that this is a contemporary photograph, but very, very different feel that you're working with right here.
Yeah, I mean, because this is more, I guess, more street photography in the sense of how it's composed, where it's, you walking around with the camera, just seeing if you can see something, and if you can just get it, or that kind of thing. And yeah, this is in Oakland, and it was a little gathering downtown, and I love when lots of Black people gather downtown, because it's beautiful. I like the way people take up the space and the way people respond to it. And there's like a lot of joy and movement. And this was just a little moment. I mean, I wish you could hear what was playing, beyond this moment, but it's kind of nice just to see the focus on the reaction to the movement, to the music. So the movement shows almost what they were listening to. So that's why this is fun, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an absolute moment of pure joy and coming together. And I think also, I guess depending on your perspective, the vibes and feeling that you could get from this photograph may be different from different people. Such a large crowd of Black people, in one frame. Kind of, I think depending on your perspective, you can feel the joy in it, or it could be threatening, to certain people who don't understand Black culture. Is this an intentional part of this work, or what sent you out to take this?
It's like, for me, it's clearly my reaction to it is I'm so drawn to it. I think it's beautiful, in terms of just seeing people beautiful human beings interacting, you know, and responding to music, you know, and just expressing themselves. So this was just a lot of little dance moves in a little moment. And I know that it's a little bit, I don't know, I don't even know what the word is. Like, is it in your face? Is it, I don't know, is it going on, I guess? You know, I almost imagine someone seeing that and responding that way, but in a way that's then good. Yeah, like that, look at it, enjoy it, respect it. But it's beautiful. You know, I don't think, I hope that this doesn't cause any sort of like, you know, strange reaction in people, because then they got to check themselves. That's wild. This
Exactly.
is just
And I love it, and I'll put it aside. But one of them I just noticed is the child of a friend of mine, and I'm just like, oh, this is so Oakland. I'm absolutely. I think I need to get a print of this for myself. And then again, I'll also the center of the image, my eye first went to the cell phone, because in amateur eye, you know, I go to the center, but I think the way that you've got these two hands coming together in this bottom right corner, as the actual true center, because everyone's eyes, you know, is going to that space, I think is, again, absolutely masterful. You've got a movement through the whole crowd happening, so our eye does not just rest in one place.
Yeah, thanks. It's fun. I think with anybody's images, you know, when you look at an image and then you really look deeply, you're gonna see patterns and these things happen. And so it's, you know, you just capture that moment. You know, if you can capture that moment, people's eyes will follow it. And then also in the moment, no matter, you know, any photographer out there, when they're photographing anything that they photograph, there's always a moment where it's like everyone's attention is drawn. There's a center of energy somewhere. And if you capture that moment, it's like almost the way someone's hair falls or the way someone's pointing or their eyes all revolve around that moment. It's really interesting.
I love it. I love it. So you're saying that you captured this moment because you felt it. You were not intentionally overthinking the image and be like, rule of thirds, put this off center, I've got to have some movement. You're also involved in the movement in the moment as well.
Absolutely, yeah. There's no thought of rule of thirds or where this falls or that falls. This is just what does it feel like? Instinct is everything. What do you feel in this moment? I'm responding to it too. Like it's a living thing. There's subject and photographer, and we're both alive in this moment. And our response to each other, how we relate to one another, is just as much what makes the photograph as all the other stuff that, you know, I guess falls into place and falls into the rules. But I bet, you know, it's funny. I bet you I'm breaking rules too. If you look at the and all that stuff, there's probably rules broken. There's clutter in the frame. There's people's heads cut off at the top of the frame. There's rules broken for sure. I got some friends who are real photographers that would look at this and be like, yeah, you should 28 millimeter and kind of angled up a little bit so you would have got the whole thing. But that's not the point, you know?
No, not at all. And I think, you know, that's what makes this work just really sing. You know, as I'm looking at the image, I'm feeling like I'm in the moment. I feel like I'm there with the crowd. You know, and I think you would have lost that if you tried to just capture everything. You would have lost that moment of focus for us.
Yeah, I agree.
We have a few more images, and I want to remind folks in the audience that we'll soon be getting to the question and answer portion. So please use the Q&A tab to type in your questions, and I promise you we will get to them. And this, you know, this could, I guess, you know, in what you're talking about, you do have the face cut off. You know, she's cut off below her nose, and the top of his head is cut off. But it doesn't. You're not losing anything in that. And I think you're actually gaining a lot. Can you tell me about this image, please?
Yeah, sure. This is a friend and studio mate. Wardell's an amazing painter, one of my favorite painters ever, but definitely in Oakland. And yeah, this is just a moment with him and a friend of his. And you know, we just were chatting a little bit, took the portrait. And the thing is, sometimes when you take a portrait, you know, we all know what a portrait is. You know, you put them in the frame and you take the photo. You know, sometimes you got to play with the frame a little bit. That's all this is. This is just curiosity. You know, two beautiful people kind of, you know, who hadn't seen each other in a while, and me taking their portrait. Yeah, that's all it is. So the breaking the rules is more of a, you know, this isn't for money. This isn't for a portfolio. I don't care about this or that. Let's just do something different, right? And that's all this is. And this is what happened.
I mean, it's gorgeous because we're drawn to the eyes, and especially her eyes, which are just so deep and powerful. I'm feeling it. And again, like, I think the majority of photographers would have flipped, you know, the angle of the lens, and they would have just tried to capture everything. And I think you're capturing so much more by what you're forcing us to focus on. Yeah, sorry if I'm just sitting here fanboying on you right now. I think you know.
It's interesting is that because you have a trained eye, what you're saying about the images, I'm like, it's things I've never thought about. So I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, you're right. Maybe, you know, you focus.
Just know, I was trained in high school. It's been a very long time ago. Yeah, but then also just working at MOAD, we get so many photography exhibitions. We've just recently had Kwame Brathwaite's exhibition, Black is Beautiful. And I see so much resonance with your work and what Kwame has spent, you know, his entire life doing, of capturing his community and not only capturing important moments that happen, but also bringing dignity to his subjects, and, you know, and his choices of composition, giving us a sense of what is going on within the community, within the time. But then there's just spotlighting the human aspect, and that I think you do so well.
Oh, thank you. I mean, again, I think it's because, you know, Kwame, like, he's a human being. He actually has respect for his subjects, his neighborhood, and not just respect, but like adoration, care, sort of a curiosity. Like, so I think that's why there's that respect in his images, for sure. And you can tell when people photograph from a place of exploitation, or just sort of, yeah, when they're trying to capitalize on something, versus when there's a genuine connection and genuine just interest in documenting. So I think those things come through in ways that we can't define or describe, that you just know. And we use words like resonance or emotion and things like that, but that's what it is. It's like the intention of the photographer, his relation or her relation to the subject, you know? So, yeah.
For sure. I've got a couple more images I want to go through. And, you know, this one is, I think, almost the most intriguing for me, because of the fact that, you know, we can't see the subject, and you have such stark contrast with the lighting, and I also can't tell where this is. It feels like downtown Oakland to me, but, you know, as someone who's born and raised here, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah. I mean, what I would say about this is that this comes from just a pure interest in light and shadow. And so, you know, this isn't downtown Oakland, but the point of this image is not Oakland, of course. The point of this is that it could be anywhere, and that I'm seeing this very particular moment, and it only lasts for a second. You know, a second after this, the lighting changed, he moved, all that stuff. But it's just, this is just for pure photography, and in terms of, it's just a moment. Can you capture it? Can you show the lightness and darkness and the play of everything? And there's also kind of, there's kind of an emotion to it in terms of it's a quiet moment. It's an empty photograph. You can't see who it is. They're looking outside, the way the hands are, you know, there's just something emotional that I responded to, and which is why, you know, I took the photograph. So I like it, but this is definitely one of those more the photography is exploration, or photography is meditation. Photography is sort of exploration of light and shadow and things like that. Not, you know, in your face, sharp images that are going to be like, wow, share with all your friends. This is much more of a quiet, contemplative image.
I love it. And the final image that we're gonna go through is one that I really wanted to highlight because you're one of the over 75 artists who donated a piece to the Critical Resistance auction, which happens to end today. So I definitely wanted to highlight this one. And I think, you know, just before this, we jumped on this call together, I looked and I see that you're already at 7 bids, and you know, I think people are seeing the power within this work. And can you tell us about this piece? And when you and I talked, there's another conversation about it, but why you selected this particular piece. And I think, you know, the Critical Resistance auction is to raise funds to end the prison industrial complex as we know it. And so the artwork that has been donated, a lot of it is overtly political work, you know, dealing with that theme. And you picked this really quiet, sweet moment. So, you know, I want to know a little bit more about why you made that selection.
Sure. Well, this selection, I mean, first of all, why this image is because it's just, you know, a beautiful moment between two human beings, a father and his son. And the reason I chose to print this image for use with Critical Resistance, but it was really, this was the response to everything that was happening during the pandemic, when the streets were completely flooded with people, and there was a lot of rage, and there was a lot of sort of, what are we going to do? And at that moment, I actually went through my old negatives, went into my darkroom, which is like in my bathroom in my little small apartment. It was just sort of, you know, it was like built a little darkroom, and I just stayed in there and just started printing. And I made a bunch of these prints and sold a bunch and donated the funds, you know, to the families of, you know, too many people, honestly, at the time, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. And it's like, you know, the names keep adding up, unfortunately. But this was, you know, my way of sort of dealing, or mentally sort of dealing with that moment, was like, let me just find a moment between two people, you know, between just showing a different side of Black life, so to speak. And I hate phrases like that. Like, this is just Black life. This is just two people. And it's a tender moment. And I just wanted to print it. That's all. I wanted to print it. I wanted to share it. I wanted people to have it, to see it. You know, it ties into the images that we see on screen, unfortunately, and being a contrast to that. And it also is just, yeah, you know, it was a sad moment. It was just a really, and I just think this was, what do I do? And me, I'm like, I do art, just make something, share it. That's what I do. So I'm glad Critical Resistance used it, and we had a great talk, you know, about that. And yeah, and you know, the fact that it can be used for a good cause, you know, for people who are actually doing the difficult work, that have always been doing that difficult work, regardless of what's going on in the media cycles. You know, they're just there, making sure that people who are in prison get out, or that the entire systems that are creating this world where all Black and brown people are ending up in these circumstances is eradicated. So that is an ongoing thing. It doesn't end in a week or two and things die down, you know, next week or next year. It's an ongoing struggle. And so that's why I have a lot of respect for Critical Resistance. And yeah, I was glad to contribute some.
I love it. And thank you so much for saying that, because I think oftentimes, you know, it's revolution and changing the narrative is something that is seen as, you know, it has to be this big, bold, powerful movement. And I think, you know, you choosing this quiet, sweet moment of, again, going back to joy, love, and the basics of human, I think, human existence, I think is actually one of the most revolutionary things you could have done.
I mean,
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No.
You go.
No, I was going to say that I see that we do have a question from Nikki on Facebook, who says, thank you so much. I have a question for Ed. How would you describe the Bay Area art scene, and what is the importance of preserving local art cultures?
Wow, great question. Area art scene is everything. I think it's one of the beautiful arts. It's very community focused. It's extremely talented in terms of musicians, painters, photographers. I mean, it's interesting to showcasing like my work. I'm, I could list a handful of photographers that I absolutely adore that are just like the homies that are doing.
Oh yeah,
And not,
I want to hear him. I want to hear them.
Sing Q, Junebug, Alex Ramos, with his photography work. I mean, he documents trains. There are just a lot of photographers that are thorough documenters of life, of our experiences. Yeah, I'm not even the best photographer in my crew. I'll put it that way. Oakland is full of artists are killing it, so the Bay Area art scene is incredible. Again, there's something about there's something like almost poetic about where it's located and what it represents. Not just people who are from here, but people who here, because there are a lot of transplants. It creates a unique sort of energy, and I just think it's influenced my work quite a bit.
I love that. Let me see. Oh, we've got a couple of them going on right now. Elizabeth says the Bay Area has the best natural light. Yeah, there is something about the light quality. How does the light here compare to the light you're in Brooklyn right now?
Yeah, well, it's fall in Brooklyn, so it's really beautiful. But the Bay Area, the winter sunsets, California in general, sunsets in the winter are beautiful. The light is fantastic. Yeah, the sunsets overall, obviously it's been very surreal, the sunsets we've been having with all the fire and everything. Yeah, the light, the landscape of the Bay Area is just beautiful. I mean, the reason I moved there is because, 15 minutes away, I can just go to the Oakland Hills and be hanging out in redwoods and have peace and quiet and tranquility. When I was living in New York, it was a little more difficult to find that. So the landscape influences the work, I think, quite a bit more than people realize, whether people realize or not. They're a reflection of your environment. If you're in like an urban city and it's, that's one type of work. I think people in the Bay just have a certain thing that I can't find. Yeah.
I want to go back to Nikki from Facebook's question a little bit. I think also the portion of the question that was talking about preserving local art culture, but then also, we're in this rapidly gentrifying city and area, and I think this current pandemic is just going to exacerbate that. As IT companies start to move out of the Bay Area and tell people that they can stay working from home indefinitely. And, while our house, the unemployment rate going up while house prices remain the same or are still continuing to increase, your photography and documentation of the Black culture that remains here is that, do you see yourself as someone who is intentionally documenting and kind of preserving these moments right now, or is that more of a byproduct of what you do and who you are?
There's a little bit of intention now, because when you live somewhere long enough, you start to see it change and you start to realize that everything is transitory and it definitely will eventually change, and it always evolves. I don't think it ends. Like, back to Nikki's question about preserving, art culture, like, it's important in this moment for artists to link up, to support one another. Even though people aren't doing things out in the world as much, they are connecting in new ways. There are a lot more talking and having conversations and sharing. And, I think that's always there, and that's everything. It's all about having that connection. And in terms of, to your question, I'm very aware that when I take a portrait of someone in front of a certain building, that building may not exist in a couple of years, because when I moved here, in 2007, downtown Oakland, you know, it looked, I don't know, it looked completely different. You know, I'm sure you remember Sears, like Van Cleef, there was Lucas, and there was like the Fox Theater, which was under construction. You know, that was it. You know, maybe there was a handful of other things, but it's amazing. I look at photographs and I'm like, that's not there anymore. That's not there
Yeah.
anymore. That moved. All these different things change. So every moment we're living, every single one of us, anyone who's on this call, photographer, everything you're seeing in the world right now, 5 years from now won't look like that. And those people are different in different phases of their lives. So you definitely should document it. And it's almost not that it even disappears, it just evolves. Everything is constantly changing. So you capture a moment, you don't see the significance of that moment until it's changed, you know? So yeah, I think, I don't know if that answers your question. It's just
No, for sure. Most definitely, most definitely. And thank you so much for that. A question from Elizabeth right now. These photographs are gorgeous and you have such a beautiful artistic eye. Will you speak about your filmmaking and how you bring your perspective to film?
Sure. I look at film in the same way as I look at photography. I didn't go to film school. I'm not trained. I'm much more of a writer than a photographer in terms of knowing what to do. And my filmmaking is really just looking at a film as a series of photographs, a series, a juxtaposition of different images, you know, put into a rhythm with sound, and that tells a story. So I look at it from a very like, okay, this is how it works. Go tell your story. You don't need the studio that. You just tell a story with a series of images, because we all know like an image changes depending on what you put next to that image. So you have an image of a horse and then an image of a person. The third image, you think, oh, that person's going to get on the horse, or the person's going to run to the horse, or something's going to happen between these two. That's all it is, I think. So that's my theory on filmmaking. So I may not even know what I'm doing, but that's how I do it. I just go out and make images like I'm photographing.
That's an awesome way to think about film. You know, that I'm gonna have to stop and pause some films and kind of look at them from that perspective. Because again, I think that also goes back to you using the analog, because you know, if people are old enough to remember films, you know, that we had in our classrooms, that the teacher would put the reel on, you know, to project, you could see that it was just a series of images that created the film. But I think in the digital sphere right now, you often don't see that. I guess iMovie, you know, does kind of try to replicate that, so you may get that. But I think a lot of times now our mind just sees it as one continual video, digital video.
Yeah, 24 frames per second, 24 photographs every single second. So it's like, yeah, that's all it is.
That's awesome. I do have a question that was sent directly to me about your studio. So typically we walk through the studio, but can you tell us why we're not doing that today?
Sorry. So yeah, so I'm in Brooklyn right now, visiting some friends on a bit of an artist retreat. Normally my studio obviously is in Oakland. I'm in my friend Tatiana's studio. So this is sort of her office. And she was, you know, nice enough to let me use the space so I could do this call. So I apologize for cheating the studio a little bit. I'm not inside the real artist studio. I'm inside a different artist studio.
Yeah, maybe we can bring Tatiana on the show in the future. But yeah, I think there's also something with photography that the relationship with the studio is also very different than you know, a painter, for example, where you know the work happens within the space. And you know, photography, especially when the way that you're working, is so much of it happens within your lens of the camera, and then within the darkroom, that I guess we could see the darkroom, but it would be a very different experience than actually being in it.
Yeah, and it's not that picturesque, to be honest. It's very
I mean it is really neat. And this is your home studio is what you use typically, right? You're not off in a fancy studio warehouse somewhere, right?
No, yeah, it's just the home studio is where the photography happens. Yeah, and then you know there's an artist studio that we share downtown that's more that's more like a collective studio space, you know, but in terms of
Okay.
the personal work that I do, and I think it's important for everyone to do that because that's your community, you know, where you go and you get to see what other people are working on. I think that's really
Mm.
important. And sometimes you need space to just like the Haiti photos. When I first created those, I just put them all on a wall and invited people to come by and just look at them to see what they responded to and what the sequence should be. So that would have been a fun time to do a talk where you can see the wall covered with all these photographs and you can see all the sequencing. But normally it's really unglamorous. It's just paper everywhere. Yeah.
I have a couple more questions to you. So for you, and so you know, at the very beginning, we talked about we talked about your day job and you being a copywriter, and I'm just really interested in how does your day job as a copywriter how does that support or relate to your photographic process, or does it just support it, you know, financially?
To be honest, they're like two separate things because again, the thing for me is I do write. I'm a trained writer, so to speak, where I studied writing, and that's like the main thing that I do. And being a copywriter, that's basically just like business writing. It's marketing, right? And it's a way to have a practical sort of duty, something that people
Mm-hmm.
actually have a need for. And the thing with photography is because I'm not trained and because I'm not like swinging full trying to be some professional photographer, I think it's really important to keep separate from revenue, to keep this as like I just do it because I like it and I can make enough so that I can buy my film and go develop it and do the things I want to do and not have to rely on it in that way. So working full time allows me to sort of play full time in a way, not full time, but you know, play without having to think about it. And
Mm-hmm.
in some ways, I think that's like it's a little unfair because I know other people are like they go for it, like work. I just think that the work changes when it has to be tied to revenue, and I think you
Mm-hmm.
should have some sort of creative practice that is just because you like doing it. You know, it's that simple. And if it ever eventually a thing, sure, it'd be great to just be a photographer, but you know, say day jobs, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, it's real. Yeah, being the starving artist is not as glamorous as it seems on uh, Hollywood films, at least I would say.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also, you know, the copywriting thing is it's interesting because what it teaches you is precision, you know, economy of language, precision, communicating an idea to an audience and understanding what that audience wants, you know, and I think that's really a lot of that is the, and you know, and that skill, whether you like it or not, influences the work you do creatively because it's just sort of
Mm-hmm.
if you have to work with intention to do it and still do that in this free sort of space. Portrait of Wardell, for example, it's like I know I want to take a portrait. There's still intention there. You get into work mode, but you want to do it in like a different way. So there's like a way of combining the, and the same happens in copywriting. Sometimes you're like, I know I want to do this, but how can I do it in a way that's a bit more rooted in curiosity or just doing something different, flipping it on its head, you know?
Mm-hmm.
They influence each other for sure.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you know, I think it's really interesting that you do keep them separate for the most part so that you are free. And I think, again, I'll just go back into like when we see your images, I think that that sense of artistic freedom definitely translates for the viewer because you're not, it doesn't feel commercial in any kind of way, though, you know, some of these images I could see being used for commercial purposes, but they don't feel you know, they don't feel like they're shot as, you know, an advertisement, or they're shot solely so that you can make money, and you're not necessarily looking for what everyone wants necessarily. um I want to definitely close out with you by, well, I want to first remind people to go check out, Sade dropped the link in the chat, so to check out the Critical Resistance auction so you can see and hopefully even bid on Ed's work. But, you know, outside of that, what's next for you? Do you have any shows, fairs, residencies? Where can we see your work next?
Ooh, Yeah, this is the part where I need to work on, because in all the freedom and everything, it's like I have no plans. I mean, so I'm a resident at SF FilmHouse, right? And so there is there's a film that I'm working on in conjunction with them, like during the residency. So that's called the Lo-Fi Blues. So I would say
Mm.
look out for that, in a sense, where that's one project that I'm actively working on with a lot of organizations. One of them being Smart Bomb, which I want to shout out them. They're, you know, some of the dopest lo-fi, you know, musicians, like avant-garde musicians coming out of the Bay Area that are just doing mind-blowing work. And, you know, we're collaborating on this film, and it's going to be fun. So that's one thing that we're working on. And then, yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about the idea of a photography book, but that's like a slow process. There's definitely the Haiti series, and then there's a series of photos that I've taken in Oakland over the past 10 years that I think there's something there. But that's in the early stages. I'm just sort of slowly gathering that. So, you know, Instagram is the main thing I use. If you want to look that up, you can see me on there, and that's probably where the most reliable updates on what I'm doing or not doing are going to come from. So
Awesome, awesome. Any last words? Well, I do want to say Kay Stevenson on Facebook says that this was her very first artist visit with MOAD, and it was a great experience, and she sends her thanks to you.
thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Kay, and everyone else. Do you have any last things you want to say?
You know, y'all are beautiful. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep making art. Keep supporting artists, and keep having conversations. It's really nice to, you know, to have conversations, because most of us are in our apartments or our homes all the time, just, you know, staring at computers, doing whatever. It's nice to have discussions about things that actually matter. So I appreciate that.
I do too, and I really appreciate the quiet power that you possess. That, I mean, I think I want to also say that I think your work is also a reflection of you, the way that you speak, the way that you think. So thank you so much for taking this time with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, everyone. So yeah, if you joined us late, just so you know, this conversation will be on Museum of the African Diaspora's Facebook page. Please also visit Museum of the African Diaspora on YouTube, and you can see this conversation, and you can see, you'll be able to also see all the ones that we've done since the beginning of April, as well as subscribe for all the upcoming ones. Thank you so much, Ed. It's been wonderful. I honestly could spend all day talking to you. I love the way that your brain works and the way that you think and conceive of the world. This has been such a pleasure.
Likewise, man. Likewise. Thank you.